All right. Yeah, welcome to my first ever tutorial that I'm gonna sell online. So yeah, if you're here, then thank you for the purchase. I appreciate the support. So enough with the pleasantries. Let's get into it. I know that you want to know the juice like right away. So yeah, let's get into it. So in this series of videos, I'm not gonna talk about, the whole pipeline of my process or anything like that, right? I'm gonna touch on a lot of it, but, in this case, we're gonna focus on, as I would have titled the video descriptively, but we're gonna talk about how I go about making image such as this. And what is this image, right? This is basically a personal work that I did like a bit ago. And the goal of this was I was trying to emulate the look of a Tarkovsky movies, like film screenshot, like Andrei Tarkovsky. So those Soviet era films, by him, I'm trying to replicate. So that's basically the goal of this personal project. And now I'm gonna teach you how to make something similar to this. So here are some outputs from this course that I did. Right, you can see here. Oh, you can see that the black bar is not so black. But yeah, so this one's pretty similar to all what we had, even the same assets, I think, for this one. And for this one's kind of different, but still the same workflow. Right? And you can see, if you can, the theme is, it's pretty, I'm trying to get pretty graphic with all of these and pretty, like, besides this one, I'm getting myself into some really soft light scenarios, right? So you can sort of see the pattern here. And how, in terms of how I go about approaching, even doing the compositions, how to find them and how to light the stuff, then I think we can before we get into that, we can analyze first our reference. So because I'm doing Tarkovsky-esque images, like the best thing that you can do is then collect some Tarkovsky screenshots. So I went ahead and collected it through ShotDeck. So I think this is also a great practice for everybody that wants to do this kind of thing, like meaning like cinematic type of work, or honestly any type of work. I think just gathering some works that you like and studying them correctly, not just seeing how cool they are, but really analyzing them is going to be really helpful. So let's spend some time to analyze some Tarkovsky shots, right? So there are several things that you can see here, like that's the constant of every single screenshot that I grabbed here is the composition, first of all, is very beautiful, right? That's a constant on every single one. And then, obviously, it's Tarkovsky. And then the second thing that's a constant about the composition is how graphic it is and how simple he's willing to go with his frames. Like, sometimes it's just a person, sometimes a person with some trees, and sometimes it's just, a person on some tall bushes and then walking into a building. Sometimes it's even just some water body, and simplicity is what I'm trying to point out here. Like how simple his frames are, how there's not many, how minimalistic it is, not maximalistic, right? And this is the thing that I think many people who did like environment concept art struggle with when they're trying to do some, quote unquote cinematic like frames, is they tend to want to show everything at once. While, if you're trying to replicate a cinematic look, then that's like the further, well, maybe you can do it, but for me, that's like the furthest thing from it. Like, what you should do instead is effectively tell your stories with strong composition, because the medium of film, like it's a medium that relies on time, right? And you can only show a certain image during a certain second or something like that. So every single image, like, needs to be as impactful as it can be and needs to tell the story as effective as it can be. So if you're trying to tell a story about two-person fighting each other, then the shot should be only about them. It shouldn't be about, okay, this two-person is fighting each other and there's a cool car behind it, a yellow car, and then the building is really cool behind it. So you're using a really wide lens to show everything. Though that what makes your frame look not cinematic, right? So with that being said, you can start to see the theme here. Okay, what's this? What's this about? Okay, it's about this lady smoking. Okay, right, cool. What's this about? You know, this is about the family here being sad, looking at a burning house. So that's it, right? They're running here. It's about this person in this house, you know, and it's about this person, you know, moving in this landscape, you know, dragging his bike along, and that's it. There's nothing else. You don't see him like focusing on any other thing that's not important, like immediately important to the story, right? So there's that, right? That's the mindset you should move into this project with. Now, the another thing that's a constant in his work is also like I've mentioned this before. I think it's how graphic it is, meaning each image like has a really nice look to it that makes an aggregate of a nice shape. And what that means is it's better to show you by doing this, turning on the threshold. So it's graphic precisely because, you know, when you reduce it down to two values, you can sort of clearly see what happens, right? And this, everything is green besides them and some parts here and some house. So, and then the arrangement is also really nice, right? It's a beautiful arrangement, right? You can see this arrangement happens here. This too, like it's really, everything's really beautiful. This too, right? And the fact that he's got a wood here that's a light shade, it creates nicely into her face, like it leads it nicely. Like, and even this composition too, like look how beautiful it is, right? And then on this one, you can clearly see what happens. This is the same. This is even like more insane to me. This is even clearer what happens. Like this also like. So I think the key is if you extract what's happening here is, you know, the easiest way to achieve this is to think about your subjects as just subjects and not actually not some, like, if what I'm trying to say is if you're trying to do like a similar story to this, right? Once you get into the headspace of thinking them as people and there's a car, you start to be too smart about it, right? But when you just think about them as shapes, then you can sort of arrange them as shapes. So this is an example. If, all right, look at how the spacing between the mom and the child and the other child here, you know, is really has a rhythm to it. Instead of spacing it them evenly, you know, he purposely, like intentionally, made it so that they two is group and this one is alone. So then when you see it as shapes, then it creates a beautiful arrangement. I hope my point came across clearly. Like same with this one too. Like it's the same thing going on. A grouping. This tree as well, right? They group the trees, you know, and this. I know that trees happen naturally, but the angle that you can take them from, like I think that affects it too. Like even this, you know, there's a reason why this is placed here, this is placed here, this is placed here, is to create that beautiful arrangement of shapes. And there's a reason why they walk like this, is to group them together and he's far away, right? Even how they're standing here is grouped really nicely. So that's another constant that you can see in compositions of Andrei Tarkovsky. It's a masterclass. You should really study his films in terms of composition. And he also uses like leading lines like this. That's really beautiful, right? Even when it's not clear, you can sort of see some leading lines here happening, right? It's just he has this really nice sense of photographic composition that's really well developed. So again, study it. You'll never regret studying a Tarkovsky work. So now, for those of you who might have taken my mentorship, like you might have known that my approach is kind of unorthodox in a way, but I think many people are doing the same thing as I did, but you know, I only know me who does something like me. Like meaning, how I find my compositions is I don't do thumbnails, at least not anymore, right? And I don't do sketching either. And but I did like sketch in Blender if I have like a clear image of what I want to do, right? And I usually have like sort of a composition thumbnail in my head of what I want to happen in the frame and how I want to arrange them. So I think that comes with practice. The more you practice, the more you can like visualize something clearly in your head and just put them into a canvas. But if I'm trying to do a sequence of frames, we won't get into how I do them, but I would, if you see the post here, like I would model the whole set first. This is for my short film, by the way. I would model the whole set that I might use, and then I'll find the compositions much later. Then and then on those things that's pretty clear already, on the compositions that I have already in my head, then I will just do them. You know what I mean? I hope that came across clearly. Again, we won't get into my sequence process because we're just doing one image here, so let's go ahead to see some sketches. So this is pretty much how I sketch. Well, this is not actually it. Well, yeah, this is actually it, but this is how I actually sketch, right? And you have some scribbles here. So let's go some render view so that we can see it clearer what's happening. So this is how it looks like when I'm quote unquote sketching. Like again, I don't do thumbnails, but I do sketch in Blender by doing blockouts because that's way more natural to me nowadays. And again, this is just another kind of my process that I use. Sometimes I would model the whole thing and find the shots, but because I already have like a pretty clear concept like shot in mind here, I just went ahead and realized it. And let me walk you through that thought. So the thing that's pretty clear in my mind is I want to do something like not unlike this one, right? With the theme of a T shape in the middle. And it changed a little bit towards the end, right? I don't mind that, but I started with having, okay, I want to have a character in the middle, some house in the back, and I have a muddy ground, and then the lighting is going to be overcast, and then, the mud's going to be wet, and there's some people in it to make some rhythm with it. That's pretty much already happening inside my head. And, those of you who took my mentorship will know that, that's how I basically work. And, those who worked with me before would say that also like the drawback of that process obviously is sometimes when it translates from your mind into 3D it doesn't really translate well and you need to do some improvisation, but that that fluency will come with practice, like, at least for me, right? And I would say that I have a a much better control of it for now. Now that's why I was able to do this kind of thing. But anyways, the theme is this. I want to have like the same T-shaped theme with character in the middle, overcast, really clear silhouette, and stuff like that. Like that's the whole theme. So then I went ahead and placed some assets. I think this was a blockout, right? Place some assets in, and then voila, I got this like with some HDRI from HDRI Haven here, Gaffer, and that's it, right? Now, to move on from here, right? What I would make sure, like, why this blockout is important is for me to really settle down, first of all, the vibe that I want, like the approximation of the vibe that I'm gonna achieve, right? Or at least try to achieve, and then the arrangement of shapes, because in the end of the day, that's the most important thing about creating an image. Is in the end of the day, it's just about shapes, right? So I would arrange a shape as good as I can. And I think in the end, I darkened this part also so that, the shape is clearer, readable. So that's that. And then after I have this, let's say I lock this down, then how I do assets even, I would make sure that the asset will follow my composition plan. It's not the other way around. I will try to not have the asset dictate what I want. because like that's my biggest pet peeve with my own work and many work I've seen online is we let our assets do too much for us, while it should be the other way around. The assets should amplify us. It shouldn't make us, like, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, I don't mean to offend, lazy, right? So let's say, okay, I have these shapes here. Now I'm trying to fill them with not shapes, like with assets, okay? So let's say I have this assets from JAMA here, big, medium, small, pretty popular, pretty good set of libraries. Let's add them in, let them load, and now I'm placing them here. Okay, this is a beautiful asset, but it doesn't really match our shape, doesn't it? Right? So then, instead of just giving up and, okay, this asset's beautiful, I'll let the asset do the work for me. No. Like, I think it's worth it to even, like, you'll see in the final results here, which I have in Photoshop. Like, even this one, I couldn't find an asset that looks exactly like this. So what I did was I don't try to find another asset because I already have all this paste. So, and you will see in the later video too, in the time lapse, I'll just disassemble some of this model and then just build my own, right? Because that's what asset should be. It shouldn't be the end point. It should be the starting point, if anything. So again, with this one then, okay, it doesn't really adhere to the shape that I want. Well, all right, well, I can always cut it in half, like what I did with this one. Like, this basically this barn asset right here, right? This is basically I've already been cut in half, but this is basically a barn asset like this with some triangle on top. But I just cut it down and then I pushed it back a little bit. So that why did I do that? Because I wanted to not fuck around with the arrangement that I already have, right? So that's how I think because the worst thing that you can do when you have all these shapes arranged is to spill the juice, right? And spilling the juice can come from the over-reliance of assets that doesn't really match your composition, or just you forgetting stuff like me. I forget stuff often. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to keep in mind too. Once you have a good arrangement, fight tooth and nail to not lose the juice. So let me show you another example from my own older personal work. All right, so this is also a personal work that I did like a while ago. I think it's 2 years ago. Oh no, last year. Okay, so this is basically the whole concept of the thing. This is what happens in my head when I'm imagining this scene for the first time that I want to do. Okay, I want some path going into the distance, like creating a nice curve, and I want another curve below to show depth and also to show some river to lead the eye into the eventually statue here. Right, I know that I don't have the statue yet here, but I already am imagining it, that there's gonna be a statue. That's why it leads here, right? And when you see the final, it's not really exactly the same, but it still really is, kind of, right? I still have the curve, although it's now from a different angle, because I want to emphasize the scale of the statue, so I switched the lens size. And then there's another curve from the river to show the depth and, to lead the eye as well. And then I expanded that motif by having this shape pointing here, having this tree blocking your eye and then pointing back into the statue. So that's how I think, I hope that's clear now that I've shown you this example, right? Not spilling the juice and not letting your asset like dictate things for you. I think it's a really, really good thing if you're leveraging assets like me, like a lot like me. It can be like a black hole that sucks you in if you're not, trying hard to keep at least some of you in it and use your assets creatively, use it as a starting point and not the end point. Okay? So, yeah, that's about that. In the next chapter, I'll walk you through how I place the assets, like the ground assets, But basically, it's the same kind of thinking. But yeah, I'll just walk you through anyways, because I think, there's something to, to share on that on that front. So yeah, that's it for this part of the course, and I'll see you again in the next part of the video.